Well, new condo sales in Toronto have dropped drastically, causing what some may fear is going to be a housing supply cliff. Here to talk more about what this could entail is Kyle DeViggy of the Condo Millionaire. Kyle, so nice to have you in studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So Kyle, let's take a look at some of the numbers that you have stated that Toronto's condo starts, 33,000, they have dropped in 2023, and they now were about 9,000 in 2025. And pre-construction sales fell from 16,000 units in their peak to just over 150 the last quarter. Those numbers are shocking. How serious is the slowdown in Toronto right now?
Well, I'd say it's really more than a slowdown. I will call it a complete collapse of the Toronto pre-construction industry. You saw new condo starts around $9,000, like you said. That's a 35-year low. We're down about 73% from the peaks that in 2023. New condo sales, it's even worse. Those are the lowest ever on record in over 50 years. They're down 99% from their peaks in 2017, down to just 150 and a quarter, which is unbelievable. That's practically zero. And what's scary is we actually risk going below zero because most developers, they require about 70% of the units to be sold in their building before they can get their construction financing. Right. And if they don't get those numbers, then they either have to cancel the building or pivot and convert it into purpose-built rentals. So this is very serious and we need to start paying attention to this.
So for years, this model worked. Of the pre-construction sales, investors, were heavily lining up sometimes to get these sales, never seemed to be an issue, and now we're seeing that slow down. So what has changed in the market to cause investors to kind of hold back now?
Well, the math really stopped working for investors. For about a decade, investors were spoiled. They were seeing annual returns of 5, 10, even 20% in some cases. Some people thought that the prices could only go up and were going to go up forever. But if you check today, oftentimes the values of the properties have dropped less than what people paid 4 or 5 years ago. And people didn't necessarily look at the cash flow because they were planning on just flipping the property before closing. It's something I never recommended to any of my clients, always hold for the long term, but it was a strategy that a lot of people were looking to do. So now they're being forced to close on these properties. They're in a heavy negative cash flow situation, which means that the rent that they're getting is quite a bit lower than the carrying costs of the property, right. The mortgage costs, the property taxes, everything that goes like that. So it's a position that a lot of people just can't carry over the long term or that they don't want to. So investors, they're not going to tie up their money for 3, 4, 5 years in a new build if the numbers don't work and if there isn't an expectation that they're going to get some sort of return.
It absolutely makes sense. Now, one of your biggest warnings, Kyle, is that we are headed for something you call the housing supply cliff. And you say that this could happen anywhere between 2027 to 2029. So what happens to the housing market then if we have very few new projects happening now?
Yeah, and the construction starts today are keys that people are getting in 3, 4 years from now. And with new condo sales at pretty much zero, there aren't going to be any new condo starts, which means there aren't going to be any new completions. So I do foresee a cliff happening, in late 2028, 29, 2030, where there's literally zero new supply being brought to the market. That's an unprecedented situation. I've never seen that in my lifetime. I don't even know if that has ever happened before. But I could easily see things like bidding wars returning to the market, right. Significant supply shortages, increases in rent. But the thing that people aren't talking about is what are the impacts going to be to the housing construction industry? Because when the building is completed, developers don't have a new project for their trades to go on to now. So there could be mass layoffs of plumbers, framers, electricians. Plus, if there's no buildings, then there's no demand for a lot of the supplies like cement, lumber, steel, these sorts of things. So this could be an economic disaster that's felt all across Canada if we don't do something now.
Well, it definitely is a ripple effect. So you have argued that the industry for years has been making these small investor-focused units. We have famously heard these called the shoebox units.
Yeah.
So do you think that developers need to rethink in terms of how they're building going forward to make this make sense and sort of correct this issue that we've had going on?
Absolutely, 100%. Because for years, developers did build those shoebox condos, which are typically units that are under 500 square feet and typically have pretty crappy layouts.
Very much so.
They were not designed for livability. They were engineered as a financial product for investors to buy. Now, people love to hate on the shoebox condos. There is a place for them in the overall product mix. Right. You have students, people just starting out in their career, low-income individuals. They need affordable housing. So they are useful. The problem is that many of the buildings built over the last 5 years, 70% of the units or more were these small studio and one-bedroom units. Okay. And now that we've seen population declines in international students, foreign temporary workers, there's a huge oversupply of these units that no one really wants today. So the industry really has to pivot to more livable design. We need very functionable floor plans and layouts. Yes. I want a bedroom that can fit a queen bed with 2 nightstands and be able to walk around it.
Yes,
It's something that I haven't seen in 10 years, for most condo buildings. And I don't think I'm asking too much. But it needs to be usable outdoor space, but also larger units, more family-oriented units where people can live and grow as a home.
Absolutely. So now if governments want to avoid future, housing shortages, because we're already in a housing shortage, we know right now. So what do you think was one policy change, Kyle, right now that could be implemented that could help to correct this?
Well, I think we can all agree that housing is a basic human need. And I don't know why the government taxes it as if it's alcohol or cigarettes. Right. Because the taxes on a new home, that can add up to over 30% of the total cost. That includes development charges, Section 37 levies, land transfer taxes, HST, the list goes on. But on $1 million purchase, that's over $300,000 in taxes. That's like hitting the lottery. Fair. That is a life-changing amount of money for most people out there. So if the government wants to avoid a permanent housing shortage, we need to eliminate essentially all of the taxes, all of these soft costs, because what the problem is right now is pre-construction is significantly more expensive than the resale prices. Yes. We need to bring down the cost structure so that they're at least comparable and people will consider pre-construction or resale. If we don't, then no one's going to buy the new homes, right, and no new homes are going to get built.
Well, Kyle, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing all of this very interesting and insightful information, and hopefully the government takes note and puts some of these actions into practice. Thanks so much for coming by.
I agree. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll be right back.
Coming out. With over 14,000 products in stock every day, we are your maintenance supply superstore. Go to hsbuild.com.
Thanks for joining us on CREB TV. A big thank you to Benjamin Tal for sharing his outlook on what's ahead in 2026, and to Kyle DeBiggy for helping us navigate the condo landscape and what we should be watching closely. I'm Vanessa. Stay informed, stay ahead, and keep tuning in for the insights that matter.